There is a silent ritual that takes place every morning. Someone wakes up, grabs their cell phone while still in bed, and before even brushing their teeth, they are already checking to see if they said something wrong yesterday. Not necessarily on social media, it could be a message in a family group chat, a casual comment at work, a like on a photo that maybe shouldn't have been liked. It's an automatic moral check, as if there were an invisible court operating 24 hours a day, judging every word, every gesture, every thought. This person hasn't been to church in years. They may even consider themselves agnostic or atheist. They laugh at those who still believe in such things. But they live as if every choice is recorded in a heavenly book, as if there was still someone up there, or down there, taking care of their moral decisions. The strangest thing is that this court has no face. It has no name. It has no clear doctrine. It is just a constant feeling that there is a right way to live, and it is always wrong. A whispering voice that there are rules to follow, even when no one can explain where those rules came from or why they matter so much. She avoids certain conversations so as not to be cancelled. She lies about her true thoughts so as not to lose friends. She stifles authentic impulses because they don't fit the image she has built of herself. She lives in an eternal moral performance, playing a role she never consciously chose, but which she has learned to play perfectly. And perhaps most disturbing is the guilt she feels when, for a few moments, she manages to be completely honest with herself. As if authenticity were a betrayal. As if existing without masks were an unforgivable sin against an order she herself cannot name. During the day, she makes decisions based not on what she feels, but on what she imagines others expect of her. At night, she wonders why life seems so heavy, so full of obligations that no one has officially imposed, but which weigh like invisible shackles. This is the most silent pain of modernity. Living as an orphan of God, but still carrying his shackles, having killed the Heavenly Father, but continuing to ask for his approval. It is the paralysis of those who freed themselves from their chains but forgot to learn how to walk. Do you recognize this feeling? This strange existential cowardice disguised as prudence? This fear of living fully, as if there were still someone watching, judging, keeping score? Friedrich Nietzsche saw this coming more than a century ago. He predicted that we would kill God, but continue to live in his shadow. That we would become free, but not know what to do with our freedom. That we would be orphans, but still behave like obedient children of a dead father. And today, as we slide our fingers across the screen, choosing whether or not to like a photo based on what people will think, we are living exactly as he predicted. We are murderers who still tremble in the presence of the corpse. There is a scene that happens every day, in every city in the world, and no one notices how strange it is. It's noon on a random Tuesday. In the central square, people rush by, looking at their cell phones, each living their own private lives. If someone were to shout there in the middle of everyone, "I'm looking for God, I'm looking for God," they would be committed to a mental institution or at best ignored as just another urban madman. But that is exactly what Nietzsche staged in 1882, in the most brutal aphorism in Western philosophy. A man with a lit lantern in broad daylight running through the square, shouting that he was looking for God. People laughed at him. "Is he lost?" they mocked. "Is he hiding? Did he get on a ship?" Then the madman stopped shouting and said the most terrifying thing humanity has ever heard. "We killed him. You and I. We are all his murderers." What the people in the square didn't understand, and what we still don't understand today, is that the madman wasn't looking for God. He was announcing an obituary. He was trying to tell a distracted crowd that they had committed the perfect crime. They had murdered the source of all meaning, all morality, all transcendent hope, and they were going on living as if nothing had happened. Imagine the scene for a moment. The madman continues his desperate monologue. How did we manage to empty the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? He is not being poetic. He is literally describing what happened to civilization. The sea of faith has been emptied. The horizon of divine meaning has been erased. And now we are adrift on a dry surface, pretending we still know how to sail. Think about your last moral decision. Why did you choose to be honest with that person? Why did you feel guilty about that little lie? Why did you avoid hurting someone when you could have benefited from it? If you stop to really analyze it, you will discover something disturbing. You cannot explain why in a rational way. Because it's wrong, you'll say. But wrong according to whom? According to what law? Written by what authority? If God is dead, and he is, at least as the ultimate foundation of morality, then this whole system of right and wrong that you carry around is just a ghost, a muscle memory from a time when someone was in charge. The madman in the square understood this with painful clarity. "Where are we moving to?" he shouted. "Away from all the suns? Aren't we falling continuously? Backward, sideways, forward, in all directions." It was the first poetic description of modern existential vertigo, the feeling that we have lost all gravitational reference points. That's what Nietzsche was trying to say. It's not enough to kill God intellectually. You can stop believing in him, but as long as you continue to live according to his codes, he is still alive within you. Like a computer program that keeps running even after the programmer has died. Think about how many of your decisions still pass through this ghost filter. You avoid certain conversations because it's not polite. You feel guilty for desires you shouldn't have. You judge yourself for thoughts that a good person wouldn't think. But where does this moral yardstick come from? Who established that there is a right way to be human? The answer is uncomfortable. These rules come from a time when we believed there was a supreme lawgiver. Now that the lawgiver is dead, the laws remain in force, but they have lost all legitimacy. It's like living in a country where the king has been guillotined, but everyone still follows his orders out of sheer habit. The madman in the square knew that this was only the beginning of the nightmare. "How will we console ourselves, we murderers of murderers?" he cried. "What expiatory rites, what sacred games will we have to invent?" Because when you kill God, you don't just kill a belief. You kill the foundation of all Western civilization. Think about how many of your daily anxieties stem from this existential confusion. You feel guilty about things that rationally are not wrong. You feel obligated to be a good person without being able to define what that means. You seek approval from an invisible audience that may no longer even exist. You live in a time when the sky is empty, but you still look up for permission. In a time when there is no final judge, but you still fear judgment. In a time when God is dead, but you continue to behave like a faithful believer who arrived late for Mass. And the cruelest thing is that this death was not announced in the newspaper. There was no funeral. There was no collective mourning. It was a silent murder, committed over centuries by science, philosophy, and modernity itself. And now here we are, orphans without knowing we are orphans, free without knowing we are free. The madman ended his prophecy with a devastating confession. "I have come too soon. My time has not yet come." That tremendous event is still on its way. He knew it would take generations for humanity to understand what had happened. More than a century later, we are still learning to deal with the corpse. There is a specific moment in every person's life when freedom ceases to be an achievement and becomes a burden. It usually happens in the wee hours of the morning, when all distractions cease to function and only the brutal silence of one's own conscience remains. That's when you realize that no one else is making choices for you, that there is no instruction manual hidden somewhere, that you are literally alone at the helm of a life you didn't ask for. The first reaction is always panic. It's like waking up piloting a plane without knowing how to fly. All those little decisions that once seemed automatic, what to eat, how to dress, who to talk to, what to believe, suddenly reveal their true weight. Because if there is no longer a God up there dictating the rules, then every choice you make is entirely your responsibility. And that is a responsibility that most people simply cannot bear. So we invent substitutes. We transfer divine authority to other entities. Public opinion, digital influencers, political movements, fashion trends, social media algorithms. Anything that frees us from the terrifying task of deciding for ourselves what is worthwhile, what is right, what is worth living for. Nietzsche called this the herd mentality. Not because people are stupid, but because the loneliness of absolute freedom is unbearable for most human beings. It's easier to follow the crowd, even when it's heading toward the abyss, than to take on the lonely responsibility of choosing your own path. Observe your own choices for an entire day. How many of them are truly yours? How many times did you say yes when you meant no, simply because it was expected of you? How many times did you swallow your true opinions so as not to cause discomfort? How many times did you choose what was safe over what was authentic? The answer is uncomfortable, because you will discover that most of your life is a carefully rehearsed performance for an audience that may not even be paying attention. You live in a world that promised you freedom but delivered only the illusion of it. You were told that you can be anything you want, but they forgot to mention that most people can't handle that possibility. They sold you the idea that choice is power, but they didn't teach you that every choice eliminates all others, that deciding is always also renouncing. And perhaps the most perverse thing is that this freedom comes without instructions. God is dead, but he didn't leave a will explaining what to do with the inheritance. Modernity gave you the keys to the car, but didn't teach you how to drive. It put you in the driver's seat of a life with no pre-programmed destination and said, "Now figure it out." What makes it all even more cruel is that this escape from freedom is disguised as virtue. We call our cowardice consideration for others, our fear of thinking, humility, our existential laziness, prudence. We have created an entire vocabulary to justify why we prefer to be comfortable slaves rather than masters of ourselves. And maybe you're feeling that right now, as you hear these words. A growing irritation, a desire to argue, to say that it's not quite like that. that your choices are yours, that you are free, that you don't live seeking approval. If you're feeling this, congratulations. You've just touched the raw nerve of your own inauthenticity. Nietzsche identified resentment as the central emotion of those who flee from freedom. The resentful are those who, unable to create their own values, devote their energy to destroying the values of others. They transform their impotence into moral superiority, their lack of courage into wisdom, their mediocrity into virtue. Have you ever felt this? That strange satisfaction when someone powerful falls? That secret joy when a successful neighbor fails? That feeling that the world would be fairer if everyone were as mediocre as you allow yourself to be? That is resentment. And it is the symptom of someone who has given up on living their own life to content themselves with judging the lives of others. That's why so many people are addicted to online controversies, endless political debates, and elaborate conspiracy theories. Not because they really care about these issues, but because it's easier to be outraged by the world than to take responsibility for changing your own life. It's simpler to blame the system, politicians, the rich, the poor, the young, the old, anyone but yourself. The question that remains is devastating. How long will you accept living this outsourced version of yourself? How long will you pretend that your chains are jewelry? How long will you call your prison home? Because the freedom that Nietzsche offers comes with no guarantees. It does not promise happiness, success, or social approval. It promises only one thing: the chance to live a life that is truly yours. Even if that means living alone. Even if that means being misunderstood. Even if that means carrying the unbearable weight of being completely responsible for every consequence of every choice. The question is not whether you are strong enough for this freedom. The question is whether you are brave enough to find out. There is a question that acts as an X-ray of the human soul. A question so brutal that most people pretend not to hear it when it is asked. Nietzsche formulated it as a thought experiment, but it operates as an existential lie detector, capable of revealing in seconds whether you are living an authentic life or merely fulfilling an agenda you did not choose. The question is this: if a demon appeared in front of you today and said that you would have to live your life exactly as it is, every moment, every decision, every pain, every joy, repeated endlessly, with no possible alteration, would you say yes? Not the life you would like to have, not the improved version of your dreams. This life, exactly as it is now, with all your regrets, your cowardice, your mediocre choices, your silent omissions. Would you embrace that eternity or beg for it to be different? The answer that instantly rises in your chest, before you even have time to rationalize it, is your rawest truth about what you have done with your existence. If the answer is no, if the idea terrifies you, if you immediately start thinking about everything you would change, then you are living in rehearsal mode, treating your life like a draft, waiting for the day when you have enough courage, enough experience, enough money, enough time to finally start living for real. But here's the problem. That day never comes, because you're not preparing to live. You're preparing to keep preparing. Nietzsche's eternal return is not a theory about what happens after death. It's a test of what's happening before it. It's a way of measuring whether you're living with the intensity of someone who knows that every moment matters, or with the indifference of someone who thinks there will always be a second chance. Think about your last few weeks. How many moments did you live completely in the present? How many conversations did you have where you were totally honest? How many times did you choose to do what you really wanted instead of what seemed most sensible? How many times did you say "I love you" and really mean it? How many times did you laugh until your stomach hurt? How many times did you cry without feeling ashamed? Most people live on autopilot, saving emotional energy for a big moment that never comes, saving authenticity for a special occasion that never presents itself, saving courage for a challenge that never appears in the form we expected. And so life becomes a repetition of empty gestures, formal conversations, controlled emotions, decisions based on what others will think. A low-voltage existence, too safe to be tragic, too empty to be happy. You put off sincerity until you are sure of your feelings. You postpone courage until there are no risks. You save your true feelings for when there is a guarantee of reciprocity. You live always preparing to start living, like an actor who rehearses his whole life for a play that never opens. The cruelest thing is that this existential procrastination masquerades as prudence. You call your cowardice caution, your mediocrity realism, your lack of authenticity maturity, as if it were smart to waste the only life you have for fear of wasting it. What Nietzsche realized is that eternity is not a matter of duration, but of intensity. You can live 90 years in energy-saving mode and never have lived a single moment. Or you can live a decade being completely yourself and have lived more than most people live in several lifetimes. The amor fati, love of fate, that he proposes is not resignation. It's the opposite. It's the courage to embrace your life with such intensity that you would not only accept living it again, but desire it. It's turning every pain into learning, every loss into wisdom, every fall into a springboard. But this requires something that our culture avoids at all costs: taking full responsibility for the quality of your experience. Stop blaming circumstances, others, the past, luck, the system. Stop waiting for someone to save you, complete you, fulfill you. It means looking at your current life with its flaws, limitations, frustrations, and finding a way to love it completely. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. Not because you wouldn't change a thing, but because you choose to transform even the pain into art. Eternal return is the ultimate test of existential maturity. Only those who have learned to be the protagonist of their own story can pass it, even when that story doesn't follow the script they had planned. The question that echoes is, are you living a life that deserves to be eternal? Or are you just killing time until death comes? There is a quiet moment in every courageous person's life when they stop looking for ready-made answers and start inventing their own questions. That's when you finally understand that no one is going to show up to save you, guide you, or give you a ready-made meaning. That's when you realize that the only possible salvation is the one you create with your own hands, even if you're trembling with fear. That moment doesn't arrive with fanfare. It usually happens on an ordinary morning when you wake up and simply can no longer pretend that your choices are not your own, that your life is not your responsibility, that there is someone out there with a better plan for your existence than you yourself. It is at that moment that you become what Nietzsche called a free spirit, not because you have freed yourself from chains, but because you have learned to dance with them. Because you understand that true freedom is not the absence of limitations, but the ability to transform each limitation into raw material for creation. You begin to realize that your pain can turn into wisdom, that your falls can become springboards, that your losses can become gains of a depth you never imagined possible. Not because suffering is good, but because you have become someone capable of existential alchemy, transforming lead into gold, not by magic, but by art. This transformation requires something that our culture avoids talking about: the ability to live without guarantees, to make choices without knowing if they will work out, to love without certainty of reciprocity, to create without the promise of recognition, to be authentic without the hope of approval. It is accepting that you can do everything right and still fail, that you can be a good person and still suffer, that you can seek the truth and still feel lost, and yet choose to continue creating, loving, trying. Not because you are sure it is worth it, but because it is the only way of life you can respect. You discover that the values that really matter are not those you inherited, but those you have earned in your daily struggle with yourself. That true morality does not come from sacred books, but from the ability to look in the mirror every night and sleep peacefully with who you chose to be that day. The creator of values understands that there is no absolute good to be achieved, only a personal work of art to be sculpted minute by minute. They know that there is no universal meaning to life waiting to be discovered, only the particular meaning they can construct from their own experiences. Such a person no longer needs external approval to validate their choices. They don't need an audience to feel important. They don't need an audience for their achievements or their tears. They have become their own most demanding and, paradoxically, most compassionate audience. When Nietzsche spoke of the beyond man, he was not talking about superiority over other human beings. He was talking about superiority over oneself, over the previous version of oneself that still needed permission to exist. The beyond man is the one who has managed to go beyond the need to justify his existence to any court, internal or external. He loves his life not because it is perfect, but because it is completely his. He embraces his mistakes not because they are virtues, but because they are part of the work of art he has chosen to be. He accepts his imperfections not out of resignation, but because he understands that perfection is the enemy of authenticity. And here is the most beautiful paradox. When you stop seeking approval, people begin to respect you in a different way. When you stop trying to impress, your presence becomes naturally impressive. When you stop asking for permission to exist, the world finally gives you space to be who you really are. You become someone who is not afraid of loneliness because you have learned that being alone is different from being empty. Who is not afraid of failure because they understand that failing while trying is infinitely superior to succeeding without trying. Who is not afraid of death because they have finally learned to live. In the end, the greatest creation of any person is not their external achievements, their social accomplishments, or their public legacy. It is the version of themselves that they have managed to sculpt from the raw marble of existence, a unique, unrepeatable work of art, signed with the courage of someone who had the audacity to be completely themselves. And perhaps that is the only eternity that really matters. To have lived a life so authentic that even when you are no longer here, a part of what you created continues to echo in the world, not as a memory, but as a possibility. What will you create with the time you have left? Write in the comments. What is the heaviest chain you still carry? And are you ready to cut it? If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit codes are ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.